What the fuck is up, world? Bialy, Atlantic Bach. We back in this bitch. Another podcast to that ass. Another Grito, sea dicho. Coming off of a 4-year hiatus. 4-year? Get the fuck out of here, dog. It's not been a 4-month hiatus, right? Last time I seen you, I still had a hairline, bro. I still have a hairline now, but I went to the barber a couple of days ago, and god diggity, dog. This fool pushed my shit back all the way like to third grade and shit, dog. Look at this. This is ridiculous. For those of you who are listening only, you can't see, but yeah, your boy got a bad haircut. In the time that we've not seen each other, but it's all good, man. It's just that shit'll go back eventually, right? For now, I guess I guess not today, obviously. I'm showing the haircuts for those watching on the YouTube, but definitely once I leave the house, back to fucking hoodies and hat season, right? Because this shit is ridiculous down here. Anyways, that's just a little bit of lightheartedness to help ease our way into today's episode, because it deals with some heavy stuff that has occurred since the last time it is that I've, been on this motherfucker, right? Before I get started with that, though, I do want to say shout out to you if you're still listening. Again, I know how the podcast game works, but I know that this, we expect our weekly content at best, right? To make sure that we have that steady void of entertainment that'll help us navigate our way through this existence. I get it, right? So if you're still here, that means that you probably have the notifications, and it came through to you to let you know, like, hey, this fool finally got up off his ass and dropped on the podcast. And if you're checking in later down the line too, I understand that as well. Like I said, I get it. 4 months is a long time to be away from the podcast game, right? So shout out to you if you're listening to this. And also, if you haven't already, make sure to follow your boy, OG_IceKnife13 on the gram. Something like that too on X, but I don't really ever check that shit. So on the gram is mostly where you can find it, okay? So yeah, dog, let's just fucking get into it. This episode actually starts on the heels of some pretty unfortunate news on my end, and that was the recent passing of my beloved Abuelito, right? Which is part and parcel of the reason why I haven't really been podcasting too much. You can hear it in my voice how emotional it still makes me, right? And I guess I just didn't want to, I didn't want to jump on this bitch, as I've said before, with with a down energy, because I do understand, again, that podcasts are in many ways a form of entertainment that help us. They're supposed to distract us from everything that's going on in life, right? And I didn't want to come on here and, deprive you of that joy, right? Which is part of the reason why I haven't podcasted. It happened about 2 months ago, October 17th. Yay, Sochi, right? Three flowers, the day that my beloved grandfather passed away. So that's been part of the biggest reason why I haven't podcasted, and realistically, hadn't even been posting much onto the gram or anything, right? But that's all part and parcel of the process. I'm trying to get back on the game, and that's why I'm here now, right? I take it, as unfortunate as it may be, I'm navigating through it with ancestral knowledge. I'm using my ancestral knowledge to help me navigate this grief this time around. More so than the first time when I lost my brother, right? When I lost my brother, I wasn't as versed into this ancestral studies as I am now. And while I'm still nothing akin to an expert on the matter, I've definitely been further polished by the waters of life to in a way where I can understand for sure, but also begin to apply them, right? In a very helpful manner, which is what they were intended for, which is one of the biggest reasons why I enjoy sharing it with you all, because I'm firmly convinced that by doing so, I can share with you some knowledge that we've been deprived from that could potentially, hopefully at least, help you as well, right? So, I'm navigating through that grief with a little bit of ancestral guidance, and by that, I mean that it's a continued year of restructuring, dog. We are in the Kali year. The European Gregorian calendar is about to end in a couple of days, like a week or so. I think today's like the 23rd of December when I'm initially sitting down to podcast this. I say initially because I have in mind like a goal, and that goal is it's not impossible, but it is difficult, and I want to make sure I give you the best product, right? Not product, I'm not selling you this shit, but I'm just saying I want you to enjoy this. And so I can't promise I'm going to, do it straight, right? Which means I'll probably take a couple of days break in between. In which case, who knows by the time it'll be finished. But it's going to come out before the quote-unquote, well, it's not quote-unquote, like I said, it's the Gregorian New Year, right? So about 8 days from now. But the whole point here being is that our New Year is not coming up anytime soon, right? We're still like in the halfway point-ish. Not really. We're toward the middle end of the year. Once March, April comes around, then we'll be rolling into the next She Week, right? The next ancestral year. But as of now, we're still in the Kali, the Matlake Kali, right? 13 structure. Which means that it's a time of restructuring, dog. Just life in general, okay? It's so much easier to write about than it is to endure. But at the end of the day, that's exactly what we do, right? Siempre para adelante, homie, to use the word of my beloved grandfather. Okay? There's no way to go back. We have no choice but to keep moving forward, regardless of how difficult doing so is, right? And in the difficulty, of course, we gain the strength necessary to continue doing so in not just the future, but in further and other, challenges in life, right? So again, I'm not telling you any of this to like sound melodramatic or histrionic, right? Even though I'm sure it unquestionably sounds like that. I'm sure it unquestionably sounds like that, right? But that's not the intention, right? I can't get over this foot. I already had a big forehead to begin with, bro, right? This motherfucker left me with like a 10 head. I got a big hand and this shit covers this whole fucking forehead. Sorry, I'm getting distracted by the video. For those of you who are listening only, right? For those of you who are following along on YouTube, you know exactly what the vibes are, right? Anyways, the whole point of introducing the shit about my grandfather, again, I know it sounds melodramatic. Just saying it, I feel melodramatic. And I know it definitely sounds histrionic as well, right? But I have to emphasize this, man. Everything that I said up until this point, I have meant it in the most affirming way possible. Okay, the most life-affirming way imaginable, realistically, right? I know even the quivering in my voice as I initially, shared the information, like all of that, as devastating as it is, it's still intended to be a life-affirming affirmation, right? In my particular case, what I mean is that by reorganizing everything in my life, it's difficult to say because, what it actually implies, so just bear with me, right? And I'll explain the metaphors here shortly, but just explicitly stated, the reorganizing, the restructuring for me personally is in terms of everything in my life that has been preventing me from seizing the ropes. This is part of the metaphor that I'm talking about that I'll explain shortly, right? Seizing the ropes of responsibility that I have been given, right, by the mother of creativity, Chalchuklikwa. No, not Chalchuklikwa, sorry. I'm pointing in the wrong direction. Chalchuklikwa is the mother of life, which in turn facilitates the next one I'm going to talk about, which is the actual mother of creativity. So in that way, Chalchuklikwa as the mother of life is, in a way, still the mother of life, or if you want to be more European about it, the grandmother in this particular case, right? But I mean it here in terms of Nahuatl, right? The mother of creativity. Okay, so when I'm speaking about and I'll explain all that shortly. And for those of you who are watching on YouTube, by the time it's up on YouTube, I'll have like a little picture of both of them here shortly, so I'll be able to point in either direction, right? For those of you who are listening, I would just encourage you to look up the Maguey plant, and then just type in like Maguey Aztec goddess or something like that, and the picture should come up. Remember, it's not a goddess because we don't believe in goddesses, but Google thinks that we do. So because of that, that's how you find it, right? Anyways, to get back on track, it's the ropes of responsibility, right, that I've been given by the mother of creativity to help fulfill my purpose, God, right, to help contribute to the elevation of our community. And ultimately, in further applying this ancestral studies, to ultimately leave something behind for the future descendants for them to continue to build on as well, right? So in this particular sense, like for me personally, it felt like I've just been out of this podcast game for far too long now. And it really is time to get back cracking with a vengeance. And I know I say that often, man, but it's a circular process, not a linear process, right? Like for me personally, the way I see it is that we're circular. It's like lean, movement, circle, right? We have this idea that we're going to get to like this end goal, and the end goal is going to be the final destination, right? So that, so the idea here being is that if I keep saying like, I'm going to get back with a vengeance, but I don't do it and I keep doing it, let me be more clear how I'm emphasizing this. I'm trying to get back with a vengeance. I know I've said this before, right? But the idea that just because I have yet to, or to feel like I've done so, or like that I'm still saying it, doesn't imply the lack of progress. It implies that I've gone through a circle in life that has led me right back to this position, but now a little bit stronger than before. So when I say, like, I know I've said it before, but I really do mean it, it's because I have the strength and the conviction and the knowledge of having gone through this already once before and what that actually implies to make it happen, right? And with this, in this particular case, the knowledge comes from the understanding. I mean, we all know. It's like a core feature of humanity, the awareness of our impending death. But do we like actually physically know it in a way where it informs our waking moments, right? Like not in a way of existential dread per se, but in a way of lighting the fires of responsibility. Like I got shit to do, dog. Like I don't have a finite amount of time. Or rather, I don't have an infinite amount of time. This is a finite experience. And I have things that need to get done. And I don't care like what, it's not about not caring, but you have to be stronger. We have to be stronger than, the fears, the doubts, the insecurities, the weaknesses, in my opinion, right? That keep us from fulfilling this meaning, this purpose, right? We could talk all about the influence of nihilism that it plays on this and, the importance of indigenizing so that we can undo ourselves from the pits of nihilistic despair that are inherent with the Christian, ideology. But for now, like all I'm trying to say is like, yeah, I know I've said this before, but I've gone through life in such a way where it ignited further the embers of this fire that I hope to stoke to a giant flame that will feed my understanding of the importance of the responsibilities that it is that we have been given. And again, that's not just me, dog. Like I'm sharing this in hopes that it emphasizes that it resonates in a way with you to help you understand as well. Like this shit is real, dog. I bring up the whole nihilism thing because we have been raised, in my opinion, dog, it's a psyop. I've said it before, but nihilism is a psyop, dog, that we are purposely brainwashed with to help disempower us so that we could feel as though we are meaningless, we are nothing, and that because of that, there's no need to be, fighting for a better future, if you will. There is no need to try to build a better world because if I'm just going to die, if the sun's going to explode and all that kind of bullshit, then what's the point of doing anything? That's the pure nihilistic despair that I was, referencing earlier. Ancestral studies and Nahuatl, this is not even within the realm of conceivability. I mean, obviously conceive it, anybody can conceive it, but that's a complete, radically different paradigm from which we're operating under here with this Nahuatl ancestral philosophy, bro. They don't come here thinking that, we don't come here thinking that it's a random, like a thrownness, to use the Heideggerian language. We don't believe that we were just thrown into existence for no meaning and no purpose on a meaningless, world where the sun's going to explode and take any trace of humanity with it. Like, no, that is defeatist. That is nihilistic. That is not at all with what the alliance with the life-affirming values of the Nahuatl. Like these are people who celebrate still to this day, but definitely ancestrally, they celebrated the beauty in life, dog. And our existence was part of that beauty in life. You know what I'm saying? And this notion that what we're doing is meaningless and pointless, like, no, dude, we are here for a reason. And that reason is to sow a better future for our future descendants, to leave behind these flowers that will, be not only a representation of what it is that we did with our life while we were here, but more importantly, it will be the sustaining force that will provide fruit and nourishment to the future descendants who come after us, for which they can nourish themselves to help them blossom and become these beautiful little flowers that are going to sow a better future for their descendants. You know what I mean? It's the rule of the seedling, dog, the rule of the corn. We're trying to get better every single time around in such a way where our ancestors were able to take a wild weed and, through scientific ingenuity, refine it to the seedling, the corn, the sacred names, dog, that we use still to this day, right? It's the ropes of responsibility, bro. Like we all have them. Whether, you've had the opportunity to sit back and reflect on what they might be or not, that's a different story. But if what we believe is true, this ancestral Nahuatl study is true, everyone comes here for a reason, dog. Everyone has a purpose. And the idea is to find out what that purpose is so that we can get acting on making it happen. To do exactly what it is that I just mentioned about the rule of the corn. right? Anyway, all of that to say, okay, much better. Come in for a purpose, right? And I know that I said, I'm going to get back on this bitch and get cracking multiple times for those of you who have still, done me the privilege of sticking around long enough to still be here at this point would know, right? But I mean it, dog, like for all the reasons that I've just said, okay? I understand that I don't have the luxury per se. What I mean by the luxury before I get ahead of myself is like, if you follow along on my socials, you'll know that I'm always like highlighting areas of concern like in the world, right? So what I mean that by I don't have the luxury is that I'm not somebody who's just here to, point out, I'm not a black pill doomer. I'm not just here to, point out all the ugly in the world and then walk away with like my hands up like, well, I've done my job. You know what I mean? And I'm also, to that end, not someone that's here to like get joy off of the amount of suffering in the world and then get even more joy and bring it into your attention. Like, no, dude, I'm not a fucking sadist like that. You know what I'm saying? So when I say I don't have the luxury, what I mean is like, if I'm going to be pointing this shit out, like I have to, I just have to, I have to offer you something in return that will help lead you through that journey that this new information you've been put onto, or that this different way of viewing this information you've been put onto, is going to send you on. You know what I mean? It's the quote unquote philosophical toolkit. I just can't, go off into the darkness blind without any understanding, you know what I mean? Or without any tools. Like, no. And that's where, when I say like it's my responsibility as a deck bot, right? One of the one of the potentialities of the Nahuatl, right? The flintstone, okay? It cuts. Flintstone cuts. But flintstones are also used to spark chips, fire chips, right? To make fire. So the fire, of course, becoming a torch that we carry forward into help lighting our way through this darkness, right? So when I say that it's a responsibility, that's because that's the deckbot in me speaking, saying that like, this is, information that I'm giving you. And because I already have this information, I'm going to use this information to guide us forward into this unknown, future, this dark future where we're trying to build a new, better world. And how we're going to do so, even though we have like a framework, is still obscured in darkness, right? Unfortunately, one of the ways in which, doing so implies is highlighting all the things that need to be fixed, the quote unquote bad shit in the world, right? I don't say quote unquote because I'm dismissing it as bad. So much to say is like, who considers, not even who considers it, but rather like, I'm not trying to dismiss it or downplay it, is all I'm saying. Okay. But if if I'm going to be putting you onto this negativity in the world, I have to be able to give you something in return to be able to navigate your way through it, right? So unfortunately, the negativity is part of, the creating of a new world. Because again, in order to know what it is that is, obscuring the path for us to this, this way forward, so that we can overcome it, you have to know what it is, which implies the bringing to light of the negative information, but also helping to provide you, myself included, and anyone else who's listening, with the tools necessary to not only deconstruct that obstacle, but also, traverse past it or move or build something, in its stead. Okay. So that's what I mean when I say I don't have a luxury like it. Bringing the negativity to your light is only half the journey. I have a whole purpose ahead of it, right? I came here for a reason. And in order to, manifest that reason, I have to do the whole thing, which is, of course, provide you with information, like I just said, which I can only do if I'm, doing this shit like I intended to in the first place. Spread the philosophy, liberate the knowledge from the gatekeepers, spread it to the hood, right? Can't be doing that if I'm fucking sitting on my ass moping and lamenting about, life. Like, it is what it is. I'm not trying to sound cold. I'm not trying to sound callous. I love my Abuelito. He was one of the absolute most important people in my life. I wouldn't be who I am today. And I probably honestly wouldn't even be where I am today if it wasn't for my Abuelito. So I'm not trying to dismiss his passing in any way by stating like, oh, I don't have the luxury to be sitting down and lamenting his loss. Like, of course, that's a travesty. And it has been grieved, right? And will continue to be grieved for the rest of my life because that's not a pain that goes away. That's not a pain that you heal. That's just something that you learn to deal with, right? But at the same time, dog, like my grandpa would have been the first to tell us, get your fucking ass up and get to work, bro. We're not doing this, right? Siempre pa adelante. Siempre pa adelante. Like I said, my grandfather's famous words. Even people who aren't in our family know that shit about him. You know what I'm saying? That's exactly what that means, dog. Like, yeah, this shit sucks, man. It's fucking hard. It's difficult. However, we have to keep moving forward. There just is no other option. This is the spirit of survivance personified, dog. Like, our ancestors didn't have the luxury to sit around and lament, like, oh, what was I? Right? My whole world as I've ever known it has come crumbling down around me. Everyone I know and love is dead and dying. Everything that I've ever known about the world and my place in it is being burned to the ground by these people who are violent to me for no reason other than, I don't look like them, I don't believe like them, etc. Right? They didn't even lay down and be like, oh, that's it, that's it, it's never been so over. No, dog, like they kept going forward. They found a way, they did what they had to do to survive. And we inherited that legacy. We inherited that survival. We inherited that strength. You know what I'm saying? So again, I'm not trying to be like cold and dismissive about the passing of my grandfather. I'm just saying, like, even he knew. That's life. That's life. We gotta keep on moving forward, right? The keep on moving forward part is actually pretty big. Again, just learning to apply the ancestral ways. When my brother passed away, I dealt with it in the most, probably not the best way possible. I was going to say the most, but in actuality, it was probably the worst way possible. It just was not good. I just self-medicated with a lot of fucking alcohol, basically, right? Yeah, there's like whole points of my life that I, to this day, don't even remember. Like whole time frames in my life, dog, unfortunately. I'm laughing, but it's like cry laugh type shit. You know what I'm saying? Because of just how inebriated I was for the first year, for sure. But also shortly after the passing, a couple of years after the passing of my brother. It's been 4 now, right? Yeah, that was not ideal. So now, like with the passing of but again, the circle, like, you know what I mean? Like, I've come back full circle, back to that point in life again. It's not this linear process like the European understanding of time would help us understand, right? Moving from the past to the future. It's like a cyclical thing. It's a circle, right? So I'm right back to where I was 4 years ago. However, in the same position, in that same position being, the loss of a loved one. However, 4 years later, I have a little bit more strength, a little bit more knowledge, and a little bit more resolve of how to navigate this perhaps a little bit better than the last time, right? And as I mentioned before, that is the ancestral knowledge that I'm trying to share, that I will share, etc., right? As painful as that, cycle was, that 4-year cycle starting with the death of my brother leading to the culmination of the death of my grandfather, right? It was difficult, bro. Like, it was difficult. And like I said, for me personally, I didn't deal with it in the best ways possible. Which, to be fair, this is me like actively going through the process of being kind to myself, because part of me is like, you already knew you should have done better, and you had a good role model in the form of your grandfather who never drank and never did drugs and never smoked and never did anything, right? He got through life and all the pain without it. Like, you should be able to too. Yeah, I should. Okay. Ideally, I should be able to, at least in the past, right? I'm trying to now, but like, I'm speaking in terms of like when my brother passed, I wasn't. Okay. And not even though I still knew some of like a little bit of the ancestral knowledge, I definitely didn't know enough. And to be more fair, I certainly wasn't polished enough in terms of my indigenization to be able to undo myself entirely of the only way that those of us who are, born and raised in a Western culture have been taught to deal with the pains of life, right? So much of our lives in modern society, bro, they're built around pacifying pain. It's built around satiating the desire, to instantaneously undo ourselves of any suffering. You know what I mean? And I was no exception. So still to this day, I'm no exception. One of the things that we learn in rehab is that it's not, I was, addicted. It's, I am addicted. I have an addictive personality. So like, this is not something that's like gonna just magically disappear because I've become a little bit more polished with the ancestral study. Like, no, dude, like, addiction is like rooted deeply within me. You know what I mean? So it's like a conscientious desire to try to undo any of the anesthetizing effects from all the various ways in which we've been told we can do so in modern society to alleviate ourselves from the pain of existence. You know what I'm saying? For me, it was alcohol. For other people, it's drugs, sex, money, gambling, like physical pleasures in general, working out, eating. There's a variety of different ways, comorbidity of them, if you will, right? All different ways that we have developed throughout our lives to deal with just the overall pain and drudgery of existence. You know what I mean? With no exception, though. Okay. So, even though I had like a good role model in my grandfather, and even though I had a little bit of ancestral knowledge, like, it's me trying to be kind to myself, it still got me though. You know what I'm saying? But that's what I'm here for. Right. And this is difficult to admit. It's difficult to say, a little break, because this is not like, it doesn't bring me joy to come on here and be like, yeah, let's all suffer. You know what I mean? Like, no, dude, like, this shit sucks, bro. This shit sucks. You know what I'm saying? And I'm not saying that again on some woe is I type shit. I'm saying it to, like, so that you can be empathetic with yourself. Like, be kind to yourself, right? Like, the struggles we all, they've been reduced to these empty platitudes on social media where we say, yeah, suffering builds character. You know what I mean? But it's like, it does. However, like, let's not dismiss the actual role and the process of suffering. Like, that shit sucks. You know what I mean? So that's why I'm like hesitating. Like, oh, here I am again. I'm happy to be here. Like, yeah, as happy as it can be. You know what I'm saying? But thankful to be here in a way where not only have I traversed this cycle, again, the death of my brother to the death of my grandfather, by not only going through the addiction of, however long it was to be able to deal with or try to, quote unquote, deal with the death of my brother, to where I am today, now trying to get through the death of my grandfather, right? And, I'm doing so with the understanding that hopefully, it sucked, dog, because this is one thing that ancestral philosophy will teach us. Knowledge comes through suffering. Again, it's not just a platitude, okay? And that suffering is physical, it's mental, it's emotional, it's spiritual, okay? But what are we doing with it? What are we doing with it? You know what I mean? Like, there should be a purpose for that. It's the meat. I've always said it before. And it's just one of the beautiful moments to me, like, when everything comes together, when I'm studying those ancestral ways. It's like, man, I always felt like this, but I never had the language to articulate it. This is what I meant before. Like, I don't mind suffering. It's needless suffering that fucks with me. You know what I mean? And that's kind of what I mean when we say, like, what are we doing with this? This question is heavily influenced by the Nahuatl understanding that knowledge is not just something that should be kept like in a toolbox. That's why I, hesitated a little bit earlier when I said the philosophical toolkit, because it's like, oh, no. That's European colonial language, right? Like, let's do a little bit better job of explaining it, because as I was just mentioning, for the ancestral ways, knowledge wasn't just this thing that, we cultivated for the sake of, like, displaying, like, oh, look at how many degrees I have. Look at how many books I've read. Look at how much knowledge I have. Like, it's not for us. It's what are you going to do with that knowledge? How are you going to use that knowledge to elevate the community? You know what I'm saying? So it's like, yeah, like, we can sit here and talk about, like, oh, I'm suffering and all that kind of shit. Like, it does give knowledge. Yeah, okay, that's part of the battle. But now what? What are you going to do with this? Like, are we just saying the suffering so that we can get, like, empathy points off online from random strangers who are listening to us? Are we doing this so that we could bring, just make people exposed to the suffering in the world? Or are we doing it for a reason, right? Because suffering, it's a very powerful tool. And this is something that, our ancestors, they knew intimately. And not only did they know it intimately, but they perfected it, dog. They not perfected suffering, but perfected the process of what to do with suffering. So much so that there were, specialized roles within given communities, right? Where these people, they were called tlamacascas. They would, in some instances, they would purposely subject themselves to pain and suffering through practices like bloodletting, tongue piercings, and so on, right? So that they could put themselves in a position of pain that could not only help them learn, right? But more importantly, keep them in unity and empathy with the communities they serve, right? So what do I mean by the learn part? Like, you don't know what it's like. I hate saying it this way, but because I don't want to wish this upon anybody. And I also don't want to dismiss your knowledge of existence. You're a human being. You're existing. You've gathered your own knowledge about it. I'm not an expert on your experience, right? However, what I'm saying is, like, you're really not going to know what a painful experience in life is like unless you've gone through it. You know what I mean? And the reason why I'm struggling so hard to say is, on top of everything I just qualified it with, so I'm not trying to dismiss you. I'm not trying to dismiss your suffering, right? I'm just saying, like, I'm just going to be honest with you. Like, I don't wish anybody to have to go through this because it fucking sucks, man. But unfortunately, you don't know what it's like to lose a loved one if you've never lost a loved one. Like, it is what it is. Like, you can know what it's like for other people to tell you what it's like. You know what I mean? But until, and again, this is the part that I don't wish on anybody, but it is what it is, dog. Like, until you go through it, it doesn't make sense. And I'm speaking on this from experience, because prior to the death of my brother, there was never really, I've lost people in my life. I've lost a couple of homies, and I've lost, family I was too young to understand who they were. You know what I mean? But my brother was like the first real, you know what, Martin, my homie Martin, dog. Like, I'm not going to dismiss my homie Martin, man. My homie Martin, but like, he was there, his really fucked with me too when we were 22 years old when Martin passed away. So that one did fuck with me, like, as well. But, like, I don't know, man, my brother, bro, like, that one really, really fucked with me. Like I mentioned, we came to this earth 8 days apart. You know what I mean? We were together every day from birth till 18 when the military took us our separate ways. Like, it was just different. Okay. And it wasn't until I lost him that I actually understood what this meant. Like, wow, I'm never going to see him again. Like, I'm never going to get to experience any of life with him ever again. That's it. It's over. He's gone. You know what I mean? That's what and the ensuing fallout of the emotional, like, grief that, comes with that. That's what I'm talking about. And I don't want, I wish I could protect you from this, but unfortunately I can't. So all I'm saying is I don't want it to happen to you anytime soon. You know what I mean? So don't take it like I'm saying that, oh, you don't know what it's like to dismiss you. I'm not. I'm just saying, like, when you do go through it, if you haven't already, you're going to have a far greater understanding of what it means. You know what I mean? But just because you haven't doesn't mean that you still can't learn. And that's what this whole point of the technocracy, subjecting themselves to pain, was about, right? Like, these were people who were brought to communities to help make the communities better. And they did so by, like, evaluating, like, what's hurting here? Like, what needs to be fixed here? And in order to put themselves in positions where they could empathize with the persons who were in pain, they would subject themselves to pain, usually physical pain, because, you can't just subject yourself to emotional pain like the death of a loved one. That implies losing a loved one. You know what I mean? So usually they would do it with physical pain, and ultimately always with the purpose, you know what I mean? So they could learn more about the pain itself, but more importantly, so that they could remain in unity and in empathy with the communities that they serve. Now, this is really important for me to emphasize, bro. This is really, really, really important for me to emphasize. I am by no stretch of the imagination trying to elevate myself, unwarrantedly, no less, right, to such a prestigious role, such as the Flamacasta. Okay, that's not what I'm trying to do. That's ridiculous. Okay, if you think that that's what I'm trying to do, I don't know what to tell you. Okay, but what I am saying is that I do admire these Flamacastas. I admire these Flamacastas, right? I admire them very deeply, and I try in many ways to emulate my life through the requirements of what they held for themselves. Okay, unfortunately, I'm not currently as strong as they were because the comforts of modern society that I do have at my disposal, which I've admittedly fallen victim to, okay? But, that doesn't mean that I can't try. It's a moral exemplar. It's a standard that's been put forth by the people who come before us, and it's something to aim for. The arrows that we have that, are our responsibility, that gives us the goals, the arrows that we're shooting towards our goals, right? You gotta have a target. Your boy's gotta be able to aim at something. You know what I'm saying? And this Flamacasta type shit. It's just one of the many that I aim for. Okay? And all that to say is that in the 4-year cycle of the death of my brother to where I am now, the wake of the death of my, it's my father. I was my father. I don't qualify if I say my grandfather. You know what I mean? I'm making a concerted effort to abstain from the creature comforts of modern living, right? Especially, fucking phone for sure, dog. But it's a tricky dilemma, like, you gotta be on social media to get seen on social media for shit like my podcast to be heard, you know what I'm saying? Whatever, okay? But more directly, like, the physical comforts, food and alcohol specifically, you know what I'm saying? And instead, try to really not only recommit to the personal work necessary to, fulfill my responsibilities on some, on the slippery earth, on some siempre para adelante type shit, but also to really, really, really genuinely apply the ancestral study. Our ancestors hated alcohol, bro. I mean, we had an alcohol beverage that was used ritually for very specific reasons, but there was a reason they had such, strict death, bro, death in some instances, penalties on alcohol abuse for people who weren't, considered qualified to be drinking. You know what I'm saying? And that is because of how dangerous and detrimental it really is. Like, I still fuck with my Modelo's, dog. Modelo's, let's sponsor your boy or something. You know what I'm saying? I'm not trying to come on here and pretend I'm some teetotaler, pontificate and moralize to you and demonize, your alcohol consumption. Like, yeah, I still, partake in my Modelo's every now and then. What I'm trying to state is that I'm trying to do a better job of not using that as the means by which I cope with the death of my grandfather, as I did with the death of my brother. And instead, use the ancestral philosophies that I've been learning instead, right? Anyways, speaking of restructuring, this is something that extends far beyond our personal life, right? But also to the projects that we're currently working on. So for me, the personal life shit would be my grandfather. Well, what's the project? The podcast, for instance. You know what I'm saying? After years of restructuring, bro, there comes years of committing ourselves to our work. You know what I'm saying? So, again, everything that I just told you right now about what are you going to do with this knowledge? Here we go again, a different application, right? After the year of restructuring, like I just mentioned, comes the years of the year of committing ourselves, the shibi, of committing ourselves to our work, right? So in this case, the actual work itself, not just personal shadow work type shit, but the actual projects that we're engaging in to give our life hopefully meaning. You know what I'm saying? Those are no exception from the restructuring as well, right? Now, I'm not saying that it's, necessary to make a complete and radical change all the time, as it can be, something as simple as just reevaluating the trajectory we're on with our work, with the ways in which we're currently going about it to determine, if they are the more constructive paths available to ensure, a successful flowering of the seeds that we are sowing, to continue the metaphor of the flower, right? What I mean by that is I'm not trying to give you the assumption here or the impression that I'm laying the foundation for a New Year's resolution. Because remember, you don't plant seeds in the winter. This is not a time for sowing anything. This is not that time, right? Rather, it's simply to orient the relations of the years in an ancestral understanding of time, right? So what I mean by that is that, this forthcoming year, which again will start with the spring solstice, it's going to be one of committing to our work in light of the change that we made in the previous restructuring year, right? So it's not like a New Year's resolution per se, so much as a continuation. It's like a circling, but now with a different trajectory, right? The circling back to, okay, we're back at this point again. We're moving towards a certain direction, but now we got to make the corrective movements in order to ensure that we're still on the right path to get to where it is that we're going. And in order to make sure that others who come after us know that this is the correct path, we're going to leave seeds behind. And these seeds are going to grow. And they're going to be there to help nourish the people who are coming forward on this path after you, so that they can have the sustained energy necessary to get to where it is that they too are trying to go. And that is to, let's say in this particular case, a point of healing that comes by way of not the societal satiated, anesthetizing manners that we've been socialized with in Western society, but rather in accordance with the soothing and healing effects of the ancestral studies instead, right? This is part of the whole shit where they tell us that, you're not here to save the knowledge. The knowledge is here to save us, right? How does the knowledge save you? You apply it. You apply it to your everyday life. All that to say is that this is the knowledge of the Maya Walitli homie. This is exactly what the Maya Walitli is teaching us. I'm not delving into the specifics, If you want to learn them, I encourage you to follow along with people who are teaching it. Mashtia Tolteca, right? And they will gladly break you down with all the information you need in order to further understand it fully in a way that I could only hope to ever be able to give credit to, right? But that doesn't mean that I can't apply it. And that's all that I'm doing. That's all I'm doing, man, is I'm just applying the lesson the Maya Wat leads to. And it's teaching us again. We're being handed these ropes by the Maya Wat. It's a magay. It's a magay plan, right? They do so much, and we can have so much from them. Food, shelter, liquor, water, treats, anything, literally anything, bro, the maguey plant, right? And that's why it's considered the mother of creativity, because ropes, in this particular case, you can make ropes from the fibers as well, right? Because it has the ability to create anything out of it, right? And one of the things that it gives us is ropes, and these ropes are responsibilities. They signify responsibilities. And the ropes, they play various functions. They help straighten us. So that, like those that are like laid concrete, you got to set a rope down to help make sure that the line is straight. They help ground us. You can tie yourself down with ropes. They help stabilize us. They can help wobbling shit, make sure that it stays in place. It does lots of things. You know what I'm saying? And in this case, it's more a matter of what are we going to do with the ropes? The ropes are responsibilities, and those responsibilities should be, doing all those things that I just said right now, guiding you, directing you, grounding you, etc. Right? But the question is, what are you going to do with it? You have something to create. We all have something to create, right? And we're never going to get to that point, and we're never going to be able to be at that point if we're not living. Got a little dark there. If we're not living in accordance with the actual knowledge of the ancestors. All right, well, with that out of the way, we can go ahead and move on to the next part of the podcast that I had planned for today. And that was talking a little bit about some of the shit that I've been discussing in my own personal classes, particularly towards the end of the semester. Although, because of how important this issue has become to me, and, I'm not trying to sound that I'm unique in this in any way, shape, or form. In fact, before I even continue along with the way, let me go ahead and give a shout out to Epoch Philosophy on YouTube for putting together an incredible video that I actually shared in my classes, all of them. Because, again, this is not something that I alone am uniquely concerned with, but there is a growing contingent number of people who are definitely concerned with it. And I felt that it was a responsibility that I have. I generally try to not bias my philosophy classes, especially in terms of the conclusions that students will come up with. I'm not in there, at least now. When I was younger, maybe I don't want to say maybe, I'm going to be honest with you, dog. Like, I was definitely more of a social justice warrior bent, if you will, where I felt it was my obligation to go in there and teach a quote unquote correct way of living. You know what I mean? But I don't do that anymore. And it's been a long time since I've done that, I would say. So this will be my 11th year starting as being a college professor, starting in January. And I would say in the last 8 years of that, especially, I have moved, probably more, honestly, like 9 or 10. But I guess 8 is probably being generous. 9 or 10 is being generous. 8 is probably accurate. Anyways, the whole point being is that when I first started, I was, I did have a considerable bias. But, now, and for a while, it's been my intention to be very astute with, or very, aware at least, with the ways in which I was directing the class, in terms of not trying to lead students to answers so much as genuinely arm them with the tools necessary to arrive at their own answers. You know what I mean? You know what I'm saying? And, that's something I'm very conscientious of. I don't want to indoctrinate. I want to educate, right? It's going to tell my students all the time, education is not indoctrination. You know what I'm saying? I can't sit here and talk shit about the evils of they schools, the Rockefeller schools, right? And then myself turn around and perpetuate a lot of the same, issues that those schools generated, which of course is rote memorization, standardization, etc. You know what I'm saying? So I might not like sometimes the answers that students come to, but it's as a fucking damn near 40-year-old man. It doesn't matter to me anymore. Like, you're entitled to your own opinions. I don't have to agree with them. You don't have to agree with mine. But the point of a philosophy class, at least the ones that I'm teaching, is not to tell you whether your opinion is right or wrong. It's to demonstrate to you the tools that you need to justify your opinion, because it's a big difference between a fact and a belief, and most of us, generally speaking, only have beliefs. And philosophy, I'm not saying that there are facts per se, or that there aren't. I'm just saying that philosophy, like universal facts. Let me be clear about that. But philosophy in general can help us navigate the path towards understanding this, these facts, this truth, if you will, and, allow us to understand and recognize a lot of the traps along the way on that path to arriving at this truth or these facts. You know what I'm saying? So, despite that, I do have like an idea in my head of what I would like students to learn. You know what I mean? And in that particular respect, it is perhaps biased in the sense that I think this is important that they should know. You know what I'm saying? But generally speaking, it really is, dog. And I'm not trying to sound grandiose. I'm just saying, like, the technocracy is a huge fucking issue for all people. We should all be aware of this, bro. Like, this is what I meant. Like, yeah, I might be biased with this, but you know what I mean? Like, this is true at the same time. Like, this is something that we should all be fucking genuinely concerned about, bro. Because it's a very, very serious issue. You know what I'm saying? So, to that extent, like I mentioned, I was showing my students a lot of the Epoch philosophy video. I showed it all to them. You know what I'm saying? Because of how important the video is and how great the video is rather, and how important the issue is. You know what I'm saying? But, it's like a 30-minute video for those of you who are interested in watching it. But what I was doing in my classes is I was actually like pausing at various points throughout the, video to really, really emphasize like why this is so important, like why this is an issue, why is this something that you should be concerned about? You know what I mean? And then just filling it in with the philosophical background. And that's something that I really wanted to do here for this podcast. Obviously, I'm not going to play the whole video because it's 30 minutes long, and I'm not just going to sit here having you listen to the video, right? I would simply just encourage you instead to watch the video and, you know, adjunctory, you could listen to my lecture, to my podcast lecture, right? It's not a lecture, dog. I'm trying to be as, you know, personal as possible with this. But it was based on a lecture, hence the Freudian slip. But what I'm trying to say is, like, I would encourage you to watch that video in conjunction with this podcast, this particular part of the podcast, because that's what I really wanted to do. Because, you know, I really do feel as though this is something that's so important that shouldn't be relegated simply to a philosophy class. Like, it's something that we should be talking about openly and as much as possible before, you know, time runs out. And I'm not trying to be alarmist when I say it that way, but that's what it is, bro. That's what it is. I'm convinced. And this came to me in the heels of watching this video in all my classes with my students, because one of the enduring and you know, I'm 6 different classes, bro. I showed this video to 6 different classes this semester. And in every single one of those classes, students had the same exact concern, and understandably so. Like, they had a litany of concerns, but the universal one was, why are they doing this? You know, particularly in terms of how it's going to affect humanity. And in dialoguing with my students and, you know, philosophizing about the issue personally, I came to the conclusion that, you know, I really do think this is the end of the class war. I think that they're setting up the stage for the complete eradication of the bourgeoisie, and that they are preparing to replace us entirely with automated artificial intelligence. They are completely preparing their transition to the, you know, the transhumanist agenda, bro. This is where, you know, and I'll pull it up right now, the clip, and I'll talk about it when he does jump on this bitch, Peter Thiel, right? That interview. Haunting interview, you know, when the guy straight up asks him, like, you do want humanity to survive, right? And he starts stuttering and doing all that bullshit. Like, and he goes on to talk about the transhumanist agenda. Like, yeah, bro, we're there. This used to be a conspiracy theory way back in the day. For those of you who have been listening along since I started this podcast, you'll know, you know, talking about the transhumanist agenda and all that kind of shit. But it's here. Like, it's here. It's not a conspiracy anymore. It's something that we're very much dealing with. And when you have people like Peter Thiel, who are so deeply invested into the, you know, the political spectrum long before his quote unquote venture capitalist fund, right? You know, he's a CIA agent, bro. Peter Thiel. It's something coming from the actual real deep state, the kind that Donald Trump was allegedly going to go after. And, you know, drain the swamp and all that kind of shit. Instead of what he ended up doing was betting those court fellows and continuing along with their agenda. That's how you get J.D. Vance as the vice president, who, again, as the video progresses, and I'm sure you already probably know, but if you don't, I will explain now, was heavily funded long before becoming the vice president by Peter Thiel. He was basically groomed by Peter Thiel to become in this position or the vice presidency in order to, you know, be the successor, in my opinion, and that of many other people, of Donald Trump, so that they can continue along with their technocratic agenda, you know? So anyways, And going back to why I believe this is setting the stage for the final, battle, if you will, on the class war, is because why are they building a data center in El Paso? Bro? Like, I'll just jump right into it. Why are they building a data center in El Paso? We are living in the middle of a desert, homeboy. Water is already, it's already a sacred enough resource. Yes, absolutely, to begin with. Water literally is life. Without water, there is no life. Again, this reminds me of that. I mentioned this in the Instagram video that I made, but it bears repeating because it's how silly it is, tokenizing like this. But it's true. At the end of the day, whether they said it or not, it's true. That quote that's allegedly attributed to the Cree. And it just makes me laugh when it's all like some random Indian, and you don't even know that's an actual real Cree Indian person. It's just like a picture of what people think a Cree Indian would look like. You know what I mean? Next to the words. And the reason why I stated it is because obviously that one quote about the two wolves inside you has now been reduced accordingly, right? Deservedly, to that silly meme about the two wolves inside you. For those of us who have been around the net for long enough, we remember when it first popped up, when it was talking about the ancient Indian proverb about you have two wolves inside of you. Which one, one wants your success, the other one wants your destruction. Which one will win? And the grand Indian elder responds by stating whichever one you feed more, right? Like, that was proven to not be an actual native story. You know what I mean? However, that doesn't take away that somewhere within that silly, euphemism. It's not a euphemism. What's the word that I'm looking for? I forgot the word I'm looking for. It's when you reduce shit to like a trite triviality. You know what I mean? It doesn't mean that it's not true. You know what I mean? And it's the same with, at least if there's not like a little bit of truth in there. Yeah, like, we all have this internal battle within us, and which one wins depends on which one you feed. Like, yeah, for sure. You don't gotta attribute it though to like some grand, mystical, tokenized indigenous person to, grounded in, factuality. Like, you could just say, like, I thought this and I think this is pretty dope. And I'm sure others have thought it before me, but it really resonates with me, type shit. You know what I mean? But, it's the same with like the quote unquote Cree proverb. Only once all the water runs dry, and only once all the air is polluted, and only once all the food is, gone, will the European understand that you can't drink money, that you can't breathe money, that you can't eat money. You know what I mean? And that's kind of where it comes to when I was speaking about the last stage of the class war. Like, water is life, bro. Water is sacred, and it's such a scarce resource already here in the desert that you just can't help but ask yourself, like, what the fuck are we doing, bro? Building a AI center here in El Paso, Texas, in the middle of the desert, in the Northeast, my hood, right? Knowing good and well, not only the scarcity of water in the desert, but more importantly, the history of environmental terrorism that this region has endured, specifically in the form of a sarco. You know what I mean? A sarco, for those of you who don't know, was a smeltering plant here in El Paso, but also around the United States. I believe there was one in Tacoma and elsewhere as well. I can't remember the other places. But it was a smeltering facility. And of course, they built this smeltering facility in the lower income, impoverished areas of El Paso, right next to the Juarez border, and what is perhaps itself also the poorest, financially insecure area in Juarez itself, right? Anapra. It was built in that area. And it was just a violent form of environmental terrorism that up until very recently, bro, like 10 years ago, was wreaking havoc, not only on the citizens of El Paso, as a whole, but particularly that live within that smelter town area, the, Segundo Barrio area, but to the environment, bro. Like, it just completely obliterated our environment. There's, some parts of El Paso, the area. No, well, this isn't, I guess, technically El Paso County, but whatever. Like, it's in this area. It's in Sunland Park, New Mexico, where the water is poison. Like, it's basically undrinkable at this point, And knowing that, and it's undrinkable not just because I'm sure of Sarco, but also because of other fracking and other operations that they've had in that area, right? But just knowing that alone, like, why would we willingly want to bring another corporation to the desert, knowing how scarce the water is to begin with, the history of environmental terrorism, and then the growing demand that this, it's a meta AI center. this data center that they're going to build here, and just knowing how much resources, water, it's going to require in order to be able to become, operable. It's like, bro, again, we're living in the desert, man. We don't have this water to be going around to begin with. What are we doing? And then it's not just here in El Paso, bro. Like, I just read of another instance that's happening in the Great Lakes, I believe Lake Michigan, but they're trying to build. Think about this. Okay, Lake Michigan is one of the largest bodies of water, within the continent, besides the ocean. You know what I'm saying? And even those people are concerned about even they're concerned about the fucking water usage that the AI centers, the data centers that they're trying to build in that Great Lakes region is going to, have. They have water. And I'm not saying that because they have water that they should be willing to use it. I'm saying like they're fucking concerned, and they should be. You know what I mean? So if they're concerned, why the fuck aren't we concerned? And that's the kind of the point, the ultimate point of how we get to this conclusion. Again, I didn't, because I try to not be biased in my classrooms, I didn't explicitly state this in my classroom. Like I said, this is the part where I qualified it earlier by saying my own personal, philosophizing on my own. The ideas came about by way of dialoguing with my students, but I didn't explicitly state this in my class, although I do teach, quote unquote Marxist theory in my classrooms. You know what I mean? So inevitably students could probably draw the same conclusion on their own, because I'm not saying that I'm unique in my, ideation of this particular thought. But in dialoguing with them and with taking into account all the material conditions, for instance, that something like a artificial intelligence demands out of humanity, students come to this conclusion, like, why are they doing this? I live here. This is my home. El Paso is my home. I don't want to have to leave El Paso because I can't afford to live here because of the ever increasing, cost of living, because of, the military bases down the street where they have an unlimited government check to just raise the rent and the mortgage prices around the city, because it's going to always be backed by the taxpayers' dollars of the United States government, right? But now you're introducing this data center that's going to completely jeopardize the livelihoods of us by the amount of water consumption that it requires. Like, what the fuck? Why are they doing this? And again, the conclusion that I come up to is, for me personally, it just seems like they're setting the stage for the end of the class war. It's like a full front assault on humanity. When you have people like, and it's not just the water, bro. When you have people like Bill Gates, allegedly, the same with, Peter Thiel, allegedly, it's a deep state operating through these little puppets that they're advancing forward to say that they're private citizens who are pushing the country in their own, desired direction because of their influence that they've gained via the capital that they've accrued. Maybe. Or maybe they're actors who are put forward by the deep state to tell us what it is that they want. And it seems as though the deep state, the bourgeoisie, whatever the fuck you want to call it, right? The idea that it's a conspiracy, that there's a deep state within the government, a shadow group of people who are running the government. Like, no, bro, that's not a conspiracy. That's Marxism 101. When you have enough material, when you have enough Skrilla, enough scratch, enough loot, you buy the politicians and they do whatever the fuck it is you tell them to do. Hence Peter Thiel and J.D. Vance that we were talking about earlier, right? That's just the bourgeoisie doing bourgeoisie shit, right? Anyways, the point here being is that when they're making the decisions where you have people like Bill Gates, who was buying all the farmland and then, growing, investing in this lab grown meat. And then, you have people like these technocrats who are telling us that they're going to build data resource centers in our, in our communities at the complete expense of the natural resources that doing so would imply. Like, what else can you see it at, bro, at this point? Because they're clearly not giving a fuck about the planet that we live on, the planet that we rely on to survive, literally, And the question just, you just can't help but ask, well, why? And the answer, again, for me, just seems to be because they're ready to replace us. The AI, the robots has come to a point now where they don't need humans anymore. It's what they've always wanted. They've always wanted complete subservience, complete obedience. And how are they going to get that? Through the robots, bro. Unless the robots are sentient and they're able to have free will and all that kind of stuff, the robots will always do exactly what they're told to do. What else have they always wanted? They've wanted all the wealth, all the resources on the planet specifically for them and no one else, right? This is where you get like the depopulation conspiracy and all that kind of shit, right? The idea that there's The planet is overpopulated. According to who, bitch? According to who? This idea that, there's a certain group of people, we'll use Bill Gates as an example because he's the one that's always talking about it. Who the fuck gave Bill Gates the authority to decide how many people should be on the planet and how many should not be on the planet? Who the fuck gave Bill Gates the authority to decide what an overpopulation crisis is, what a population crisis is in general, let alone an overpopulation crisis, right? And more importantly, who gave him the fucking authority to determine the outcomes that are going to be taken to reduce, if you will, this overpopulation? He is nobody. He's a fucking pencil-necked pipsqueak bastard who just put himself into a position of power because of the money that was invested into him by these deep state actors, this bourgeoisie who are trying to push forward an agenda that serves only their interests. And historically speaking, the only thing that has ever served as an obstacle to their complete and total domination was the resistance of the working class, first and foremost, but also their reliance on the working class. They fucking need us, bro. They haven't been shit without us. Until now, where you have the robots and the AI and their desire to expedite that process as quickly as possible, just to set the stage, in my opinion, again, for the final stage of the class war, where they can completely eradicate us because robots don't need water. Robots don't need food. Robots don't need a clean atmosphere. Humans do. We do, right? And at the trajectory that they're currently heading on, it's just not going to be there anymore. It's not going to be there. And the idea that this is somehow like a conspiracy, bro, it's now December 26th. It's 70 degrees outside in El Paso, bro. The birds never migrated. They're still outside my window to this day. You know what I mean? It's 10 degrees above average in El Paso, bro. It's hot. It's like spring, almost summer weather already. Okay? We don't have a winter anymore. This idea that this is just some fucking leftist conspiracy, liberal conspiracy, global warming, maybe. Or maybe you're just a fucking stupid right-wing chud who would rather blindly boil in this fucking pot like a little lobster than actually buck up and own the responsibility that you have to challenge these fucking alleged authority figures like Bill Gates and company who tell us that this is what they want for our lives. This is what we deserve for our future. We don't, right? This is why I've always said from the very get-go, for those of you who have listened to this podcast long enough, my loyalty is not with any nation. My loyalty is not with any state. My loyalty is not even to a group of people of any kind, ethnicity included. My allegiance is strictly to the land. That's it, right? I'm loyal to the land, loyal to the soil, right? Fuck that conspiracy theory bullshit. Loyal to the soil, bro, not loyal to the foil, right? It's like the land is what provides us with everything, bro. Just a quick summation of shit I've already said. The land provides us with everything that we need to survive. It's the bitch-ass capitalists who come along, build fences, and then sell the resources back to us for our survival. At the end of the day, though, the land has provided everything for us. It is the land that we all came from, and it is the land that we will all return to once our time on this slippery earth has come to its end. So to see the land under full-fledged attack by these opportunistic capitalist fucking scum, swine bastards for their own personal benefits so that they can set up this, utopic society for themselves, a small number of people with the whole world at their disposal at the complete expense of every other human being on this planet, it's fucking pitiful, bro. It's pitiful. And that's where I really genuinely do believe. So I know I mentioned I was going to play the video. I'm about 20 some odd minutes into this bitch. And I promise I'm going to play it, right? Not the entirety. I'm going to go through the video and then I'm going to break it down and shit, right? But, it's one of the things the video does talk about. It talks about is this what comes next after capitalism? In many ways, yeah, you could definitely see it that way, right? The end of capitalism, bro. Let's just cut to the chase. Some people do see it, I don't know. Again, it's discussed in detail in the video. It's not that I don't want to discuss it now. It's just that I myself am still conflicted on what I personally see it as, aside from setting the stage for the fucking last stage of the class war. But, some people see it as the end of capitalism. Some people see it as just another transmogrification, if you will, of capitalism. Late stage capitalism and decline, complete at the end of late stage capitalism. I don't know. Like I said, I'm not trying to particularly, I would like you come to your own conclusion type shit. You know what I mean? In my opinion, like I said, it's stating the stage for the class war, the end of the class war. But whatever the case might be, before we can even continue, I guess it's important to first explain what techno-feudalism, not the technocracy. The technocracy is like the PayPal mafia, bro. Elon Musk, Peter Thiel, all those fuckheads from Silicon Valley that have come together basically to take over I don't even want to say take over because it's just, it implies that they existed outside of it. And again, this is not how this shit works out. This is old money being, filtered in through young bodies to advance this narrative of illusion, like free choice, but it's never been free choice. Never, not under material conditions, bro. The people who own the material, goods, they determine the outcome of events. And, history is the result of them doing that. And then the working class fighting back and saying, fuck you. You know what I'm saying? That, at least according to a dialectical materialist reading, a historical dialectical materialist even reading of history and reality, right? But whatever the case might be, Doug, the way that this techno-feudalism works is predicated under the same principles as capitalism. So let's take the data center, for example. What they're going to do is, it's an extractive a system. Meaning it doesn't give anything in return. Like it doesn't produce anything. It just takes and takes and takes. Right? Which traditional capitalism has that too. But what makes this different is that capitalism, at least, it creates something in return because it has to sell. In order to take, it has to sell. Right? And you have to be able to afford what it is that other people are selling. So it's extractive for sure. It extracts, lots of things. Joy, labor, all kinds of stuff, right? From people. But at the very least, something is created in exchange, right? With this techno-feudalism, though, that's not the case. So let's use the example of the AI center here in El Paso. So many distractions unfolding at this time, but here we are, pushing forward, siempre para adelante, right? So going back, it's an extractive resource system of extraction. Using the example of the AI, Meta AI center that's going to be set up here in El Paso, we're paying for that. You and I, the El Paso taxpayers, right? And we're not going to get anything in return from that. For one, that's the whole point of capitalism, unlike socialism, right? So this is one of the important things that I focus on in my lecture whenever I was discussing this, but we'll continue to do so in the future, is just explaining to people, first and foremost, a lot of the differences between the economic systems, capitalism, socialism, Marxism, Taoism is me, right? Leninism, Maoism, etc., right? Those are the materialist, dialectical materialist philosophies. And then just outright communism, right? It's like on a spectrum. You know what I'm saying? And then on the far right of the spectrum, obviously you have capitalism. And now the new goalpost, which would be, techno-feudalism. Anyways, in this particular case, the example here being the distinction between capitalism and socialism. A lot of people wrongly equate socialism with Marxism and communism when, it's just, that's too simplistic of a reading. Now, to be fair, socialism is the road to Marxism, or to communism rather, right? But, there's still a lot of capitalist elements inherent within socialism. And the basic distinction between the two is that in a capitalist system, and this is a very rudimentary fundamental distinction. Like it's obviously more complex in this, but for the sake of this purpose here, it's more than enough to suffice, right? Capitalism is a system where one of the features of it is that the losses are made public and the profits are made private. So in this particular case with the stadium, I keep thinking of the stadium because that was the initial reaction that came to my mind when I learned about this. It was how I learned about how this works. About 15 years ago, they built a AAA stadium here in El Paso, the El Paso Chihuahuas. And, that's when I learned about how stadiums are built, financed by taxpayer dollars and all that kind of shit, right? And it was just really upsetting learning about that kind of shit, not just with the Chihuahuas, but professional leagues, the entire leagues like the NFL, golf, you know what I'm saying? Applebee's, Walmart, all these companies and corporations that make billions of dollars that are subsidized by our tax money. You know what I mean? And in exchange, we don't get any of that money in return, none at all whatsoever, right? They'll always throw in these little alleged incentives. They'll say we're going to stimulate the economy, the local economy, and we're going to provide jobs to people in the area. Bro, this AI meta center is going to provide some like 50 jobs to El Paso. The borderland has like 2 million people in it as a whole. I'm talking about Las Cruces, El Paso, and Juarez. You know what I mean? And in that entire 2 million people population, like a couple, like I think up to 2,000 people, 1,800. At one point, it said is going to be at the height of the construction will be 18,000 construction workers. But after that, they're only going to have 50 jobs for the 2 million to offer 50 jobs to the 2 million people in this area. Like, how is that an incentive, bro? You know what I mean? The same with like the stadium. Motherfuckers, the stadium is closed half the year. And, you know, occasionally it'll open up for events, but generally speaking, baseball is only 4 months long, dog. What about the other 8 months of the year? What about the jobs then? What about the stimulating the local economy then? You know what I mean? But, yeah, so this is how the distinction then with socialism is that, yeah, the taxes are going to go to create something like that. But in exchange, people are going to get something in return, anything in return, dog. The best example that I can give you is when they legalized marijuana in Colorado initially, like, 20 years ago already? Almost. Colorado had this amendment in their state constitution where if the government collected too much tax dollars, they had to return that money back to the citizens. You know what I mean? Like whatever was over in excess, like they had a set amount of money that they needed to collect. And anything that was accrued in excess of that was going to be redistributed to the citizens. That's a form of socialism, bro. You know, this idea that, hey, bitch, you're already taxing me out the ass for my taxes. What do you mean I don't get free healthcare, universal healthcare? What do you mean I don't get fucking a decent infrastructure to live on? What do you mean I don't get, at the very least, the guaranteed assurance that I'm not going to fucking go bankrupt because I have a medical injury? This is all like basic first world things that people in the 21st century in this age of abundance should not be worried about. And that's things that socialism, despite I'm sure its many faults, you know, at least attends to. You know, you have these socialist countries where you have people that at the very least have guaranteed health insurance, bro. It's not tied to their job. You have people that if they, you know, get sick, they're not going to go bankrupt. You have people that if they face some sort of, you know, job loss or, you know, job insecurity or food insecurity, that they're going to be provided for with their tax dollars. Ours are just taken and given to Israelis so they can have all that benefits at our expense, right? And then when we call it out, the fucking right-wing MAGA chuds look at us and say, oh, you fucking filthy pinko commie bastard. And it's just like, sometimes I wish I didn't have this profound fucking, not profound rather, but I sometimes wish I didn't have this fucking incessant need to be fair and liberal in my classes, and I should have indoctrinated you to believe otherwise, right? I'm fucking around. I'm joking, obviously. But, yeah, that's a tangent. Just getting upset at all these fucking dumbass magatards with their 6th grade reading comprehension level that will listen to what I just said. Like, hey man, we deserve universal health care. We deserve the ability to ensure that we're going to be able to put food and water and shelter, provide ourselves with food, water, shelter, and safety. Not because I want you to give it to me, but because you're taking my fucking tax dollars and you're using it to do that shit for other people anyway. So you might as well fucking do it to me, the person who fucking, you know, generated that tax revenue in the first place. You know what I'm saying? But, so yeah, that would, in a nutshell, be the distinction between capitalism and socialism. So in many ways then, going back to this technocracy, this techno-feudalism shit, they're going to take our local tax dollars. And, you know, we're already seeing it. So in the video, again, I'm not sure exactly at what mark this is in the video, but you'll see it if you listen to it. They start talking about like the energy rate increases. It's a brief section when they're talking about like what it takes to set up the foundation for, you know, this techno-feudalism and, the effects that it has on the local environments. I already discussed the climate impact, but now we're talking about the material impact as well. In this particular case, like it's going to cost a lot of fucking money. And a lot of that money is going to come from the electric company, which we're already experiencing here in El Paso, where they already raised the rates incredibly just in the last 2 years alone. And then the next year, they're seeking to increase it by another $23 per, you know, household. And it's like, do you guys not see what's going on here? Like the El Paso Electric Company is not a public utility. It's not something that we as El Pasoans are investing our money into and then getting something in return beyond what we pay for, right? This is a private corporation that's listed on the fucking stock exchange, dude. There's people who have a vested interest in making as much money from each and every single household in the El Paso area, Las Cruces included, because they're facilitated by the El Paso Electric Company as well, right? You have these fucking bitch ass capitalists on Wall Street who look at this and they say, we can make more money from these people here. And we can help this, do even more so by building an AI center there at their expense. This is exactly what they're talking about by an extractive system. Like and that's just the foundation, bro. That's just to set this bitch up. You know what I mean? Once it's up and running, and this is the point where it gets to in the video. One of the things about the video I should qualify is they do an amazing job of introducing the quote unquote conspiracy of you will own nothing and you will be happy. 5 years ago, it was a conspiracy to tell people this. You know what I mean? Now, if you still think it's a conspiracy, it's because you're a fucking moron, quite frankly. It's not. And this is, to the credit of the woman and the dude in the video, the Epoch Philosophy, he does give her credit as well. To the woman who initially introduced this idea of you will own nothing and, you will be happy before the World Economic Forum took it over. Her stance was that because we live in an era of abundance, you won't need anything. Everything will be given to you because everything is available to every single human on this planet, right? And then the World Economic Forum got involved. And of course, those capitalists, those bourgeoisie, those reptilians did exactly as they do. And they fucking twisted into something far more dark and macabre. And that is, of course, the fear of the techno-feudalist. So what happens then is that after the system of extraction has been completely set up at the expense of the local populations, they're not going to offer anything in return. They're not creating goods. They're not creating services. That's why they're only going to have 50 employees. It's not like a manufacturing warehouse where you can go and clock into your 9-to-5 job and create something. It's not what's happening. What's happening is they're creating cloud capital. And what that means is they're just setting up a system for which other systems of extraction will operate on. So like the Amazon Web Services, that's basically all that it is. They're creating, systems like Facebook, Instagram, Google, Uber, all these services that they don't provide anything. They just connect you and I to one another just for us to sell each other shit, basically, right? Whether it's material goods or whether it's our labor, like in Uber, you know what I mean? And while Uber, for instance, because they talk about Uber in the video, so we'll go with Uber. While Uber is doing none of the work, they're going to be the ones making all of the money. Like if you ask an Uber driver how much they make, it talks about it in the video. I don't know. I've never asked, and they don't explain in the video. But apparently, it's not much, which I imagine. And they rely primarily on the tips of the passengers, for their income. Which, of course, because we all know how much servers make and who set that system up, right? But that's basically the gist of what this technocracy is going for. And the question then becomes like, okay, if you're replacing all the workers and the workers need jobs to produce, at the very least money for themselves to provide food, water, shelter, and safety, what's going to happen when people don't fucking have jobs to go to? It's quite frankly that simple. The example that I give in class, and it's one that, I think about quite often, is if people were throwing hands over toilet paper during the pandemic, what are they going to do when they can't afford to put food on the table for their family? What are they going to do when they can't afford medicine for their sick or dying loved ones? When they can't afford formula for their children, food for their children in general, right? What are they going to do when they don't have access to water because they can't afford it anymore? And not because they're lazy and not because they're entitled and they deserve water just for existing, which we should, but rather because the jobs that were once available no longer exist. They've either been entirely automated out, or the infrastructure for which that traditional form of capitalism was predicated upon, where someone goes and exchanges their labor for a wage, no longer exists because capitalism is dead and technocracy killed it. And then it gets on to this next part, Doug, which in my personal opinion is critically important. So much so that it merits its own particular discussion, which I'm going to bookmark till my next episode, which is not going to be 4 months away. It's not going to be even 1 month away. It's going to be soon. Okay. And, I just don't want to do it now because it's such an important topic that it merits its own discussion. It's like a topic within the topic. And I'm speaking here of Palantir. The role that Palantir plays in the technocracy cannot be understated because Palantir is another Peter Thiel funded corporation. And because of that, it's deeply, deeply immersed in what's going to unfold with this techno-feudalism, right? So I'll go ahead and bookmark that for now and move on to the next subject that I had in mind. But before I do, I did want to end this simply by stating that techno-feudalism, the name that it gets, it comes from feudalism, obviously, which one of the many lovely legacies that we've inherited from European colonizers, right? But it's important to just at least explain what it is for those of us who aren't familiar. And it's basically the idea that you had a landed gentry back in the day that owned, allegedly, a large plots of land, and then you had people who had to work that land for their sustenance, right? The peasants, basically. And they had to, give a portion of that, of their labor to the feudal lords who did nothing but keep them in check by way of military force, policing, essentially, right? Whether it be like customs and traditions or actual military or police in the feudal days, right? And that's another, a further element, another element, if you will, of the technocracy. I mean, we're already seeing it on full display, bro. I know I've mentioned this before, but it bears repeating. Fascism is the merger of business and government, okay? Private business and the government. If you ask me personally, and many people who are in, this ideological camp as I am, America has always been a fascist nation since day one. Okay. Private industry, quote unquote, private industry has always owned the government in one way, shape or form or another, namely through its investment. It's so open and on display now. Historically, you can get away with calling this a conspiracy because they were at least tactful about it. Now you have Palantir and the UFC and fucking McDonald's, bro, who openly sponsor events by the United States government. And there's a quote that says that fascism is liberalism in decline. And what that means is that we've had this illusion of like harmony, I guess, if you will, in the United States, that everything was somehow separate, business and government were somehow separate, and that life was beautiful. But once the material conditions get dire enough and the faults in capitalism are revealed, it's not going to die without a fucking fight. And the fighting arm of capitalism is fascism, right? Which is where we get to where we are today, where you have Democrats, this party that, me growing up was told was the anti-war, anti-police, anti-this, anti-that, right? Anti-things that were generally considered to be right-wing party that is now like in clear state itself of a right-wing authoritarian dictatorship, right? And it's not by accident. That's how this shit is set up. That's how it works. When it starts with the feudal lords back in the day who kept people in check by ensuring that their, entire sustenance was dependent upon the land that they were allowed to work for in exchange for, their ability to live there, under the understanding that they'd give some to the feudal lord, right, in exchange. And now where we are currently today, where we're basically operating within the same system have been, right, prison planet, if you will, where we're being taxed, as I mentioned before, to uphold the system that benefits only a select group of people. And then now moving forward, where it's going to become a techno-feudalism, where we have to rent our space on the cloud that they're building with our fucking money in order to continue to operate any sort of businesses, right? Whether it be us personally renting out our labor through things like Uber, where we'll get no, benefits, as I just mentioned, for doing so, but still have to do all the work, right? But like I said, that'll be the next part of the episode, or the next part of the discussion. So, on to this third part. By now, bro, it's been so long. It's been so long since I've done one of these bitches that it's taken me a while to get everything reconfigured properly again. But hopefully, by this point, this is the third part of the podcast. Third and final. And it's the third different day that I'm recording on. The clothes looks the same. The hair looks the same. Everything else looks the same. But it's been 3 days of recording and editing this bitch, right? And because of that, you'll notice that the audio and even the video in some respects, for those of you watching on YouTube, has gotten exponentially better since then, right? So I do apologize for I just fucked up the audio the first two times. The middle part, the last part that I just did on technocracy wasn't as bad as the first part. And if you were able to dug out the first part, I really fucking appreciate it, dog. Part of me considered I should just go back and re-record it, but your boy was to you continue the metaphor from the first part of the podcast. I was on a roll, dog. I didn't want to. That's not some shit. That's out the heart. You know what I mean? And to sit down and write it out and try to recall it the way I did it the first time, it just wasn't gonna happen organically, right? So I was like, nah, fuck it, dog. So if you listen to it, I really appreciate it. The second part wasn't as bad, but it was still pretty fucked up. I just, this is a one-man show, dog. So I gotta do the AV and I gotta do the writing. I gotta do it all. It's not like, oh, what was I type shit. Like I love doing this. That's why I do it for free. I'll do it for free, right? Chicken. That's the Dave Chappelle joke. If chicken ever approached me to do a commercial, right? So yeah, that's why I do it, dog. It's fucking fun. But because of that, I didn't, have no background in this AV game. I just sat down and tried to figure shit out as it, on the fly. And I was rolling at one point when I was consistently pumping these bitches out, but because I haven't podcasted in so long, like there's just little things that I forgot here and there, how to work the soundboard, how to correctly wire the audio into the app, the recording software, and all that kind of stuff, right? So hopefully by this point the audio sounds far better. And if it doesn't, that might just be my sign to hang it on up, right? I'm playing, dog. Just a sign to keep figuring out what the fuck is going on, right? But with that said, the last part that I did want to address today, actually, before I get into that one part, there is one part of that video from the epoch philosophy that I didn't address the last time I was recording. And I did want to address it now. And it's, again, a part that focuses on Peter Thiel. And it's the part where he's talking about the social engineering of social media, essentially, in order to assert their will. And the reason why this is so important is because, again, the quote unquote conspiracy foos had always been critiquing the power structures, right? The power elite, the masters of mankind, to use famed Epstein list client. The fuck's his name? It's that old dude. Did the debate with Foucault. Damn, I don't even know his fucking name. It's not important, dog. It's Noam Chomsky, that fuckhead, right? His language, the masters of mankind, the ones that he used to rub elbows with on his way to Epstein Island, right? What the conspiracy fools would critique them of is trying to subvert and undermine free will. And, they would usually come at it from a religious perspective and say shit like, God endowed humans with free will, and that's what makes us uniquely human. And in their attempt to subvert the free will, they're undermining God's authority type shit, right? Which I'm not saying is not happening. They're definitely undermining human free will if it does exist, right? I just don't view it, obviously, from the Christian moralizing lens. So, and it's not because I think that humans are not special. Like, obviously, that's not the case. I think humanity as a whole is fundamentally important and special more directly, right? But so much so because I don't see it from like it's a different start point, different end point, right? For the Christians, it always boils down to like a war on God, essentially, right? And that's not the conclusion that I arrive at. It's a war on humanity for sure. And I'm not trying to make the connection that gods are humans. Like, that's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying it's a complete different way of understanding it from an ancestral lens, right? But to be fair, they do talk a lot about the Antichrist, and Peter Thiel, and the next part that I'm going to talk about too. I'm going to talk about Joe Rogan, dog. Briefly, I have a lot of shit to say about Joe Rogan for a lot of reasons, and this is going to be my first of many introductions into what it is, right? But like I said, before I do get into that, I did want to address one part of that technocracy, techno-feudalism video by Epoch Philosophy, where it's Peter Thiel talking about the social engineering of culture, essentially, in order to direct it in a way that they find suitable. It's no secret that these technocrats have been trying to control society and trying to move the masses, if you will, in a way that favors their interests and more directly that favors their worldview, what they have in mind for humanity and post-humanity even. And one of the biggest obstacles to them has always been the free will that people exercise. Now, I use the term free will very, very loosely because, from a philosophical, scientific perspective, it's a matter of debate whether or not it exists. I'm not necessarily willing to completely discount the existence of free will, despite the quote-unquote irrational bent that would necessarily place upon me from a Western reductive, philosophical, materialistic, philosophical understanding of free will, right? which states that, there is no free will, just like there is no soul. It's just as ridiculous and irrational as saying 2 + 2 = 5, right? And to disagree would render you irrational. Maybe, dog, right? And the reason why I stated is I'm not like on some anti-irrationalism. I'm not on some, anti-rationalism shit so much as it is ancestral shit, which emphasizes that rationality is one of the 4 different tools that humans have to understand truth, like creativity is another one. The emotions are a third one, and I can't remember off the top of my head the 4th one. I got to go back through my notes, right? But what I am saying then in relation, that's not important for now. What's important for now is the role that this has on, free will, if you will, with what Peter Thiel is saying in that video from Epoch Philosophy, where he's saying that basically, the biggest obstacle that they, the masters of mankind, have faced in asserting their world order has always been humans who just don't agree with them, right? And one of the things that he mentions is how they're going to be able to subvert that moving forward through, techno-feudalism, because once all of our information is, once it's completely data mined, and I mean, it's an exasperative comment because they already have it all, dog. Even if unless you're living out on the fucking off the grid, they have all of our information, more so than others. If you're not on social media, obviously they have less information on you. But if you use credit cards, if you use debit cards, if you're out in public, dog, because of the mass surveillance system that we live under, they have our information. You know what I mean? And what Peter Thiel is stating then essentially is that because they have all this information and all the algorithms and the predictive programming type shit, that they can start to sway the opinions of the masses subconsciously. And that's where you get into the whole occult shit where they're predictive programming and they're placing, hidden symbolism in movies and commercials and music and all that, which I'm not saying they're not. I'm just stating that they're being very open about it. And now there's actual proof in terms of the data mining that they have, because the way that the data that they accrue from us works is they basically know exactly what it is that we're going to do before we even know what we're going to do, right? This is where you get into the Minority Report future that movie was trying to warn us about. So it's was it a warning? Was it a priming? Was it, parallel thinking? Was it people looking at that movie and say, yeah, that's a great idea, we should do that, right? For those of you that don't know, Minority Report is a Tom Cruise movie where he plays a policeman that prosecutes people for future crime, which is where, because the technology in the movie has gotten to a point that is so accurate, they are able to predict crime that occurs 2 weeks in advance. And the rationale is that they're able to prevent the loss of innocence because they arrest the people who were going to commit the crime prior to them doing so. And it gets into this whole question of free will, do you have the right to stop people from committing actions even if they're not going to, not if you have a right to stop them from doing the actions, but how do you know that these people are still going to commit the actions more directly? If you can't you just educate them and let them know hey, on this day at this time, you're going to do this, so don't do that. You know what I mean? And then obviously from there, it spirals further into the question of actual free will. And that's where you get the Christian moralizing reading of it. They're trying to play God because humans, what makes us uniquely human is our ability to decide, right? And again, that comes from a Christian understanding of reality, because in a nutshell, this is very essentialist, but basically when it comes to free will, Christians in general, the Abrahamics, they don't believe, but they also believe in free will. They're what you would call a compatibilist, right? They'll say things it's all part of God's plan, but it's your choice whether or not you get there, right? So that's compatibilism. And once you remove that choice from humans, that's where they get into the whole playing God and the Antichrist type shit, right? So in that video, Peter Thiel openly talks about how, yeah, we don't even have to, worry about what these people are going to, you and I, the working class foes, are going to do anymore, because we can just program them subconsciously through their social media algorithms to predict exactly what it is they want to do, and then, direct them in the way that we want them to do, and then give them the impression that they're going to be, exercising their free will by doing so. The best example that I can give you of this is the example that I was giving in my class is, and this is where we get into the Joe Rogan part, which is why I wanted to qualify it first and foremost. For those of us who remember the ancient past of less than 1 year ago, about 1 year ago now, right? In January, which will be in about 5 days from today, before Trump
took into office the zeitgeist of just the world in general, it felt like, but definitely the United States of America. People who were just quote unquote fed up, or I don't want to say quote unquote, they definitely were, but the quote unquote goes to the woke part, right? Where people were fed up with the quote unquote woke culture that had permeated American society since about 2015, right? And what happened essentially is that for many people, and I'm not going to lie, like myself included at a point, like there really was a point in time at the end of the Biden administration where I was just like, this is so frustrating, bro. The trajectory of the country is at such a frustratingly disgusting point where even someone like myself, who is, I just spent the last part of the podcast telling you how I'm loyal to the land, bro, nothing else. I'm loyal to the soil, right? Even I was like, bro, I might go out there and fucking vote for Trump just out of principle, just because I'm so fucking tired of this shit. You know what I mean? I didn't, and I never would. But the fact that I was aware of that sentiment within myself, it's enough evidence for me to know that, like, obviously, it's not like I'm just making shit up. People openly stated, like, we're so fucking tired of this shit, this woke culture nonsense, that we're willing to vote for a president who's going to go against it, right? You got Joe Rogan, who's one of those very people, when he's talking about the woke mind virus on his podcast and shit, right? And Trump was promised to be this saving grace from this woke nonsense and everything that it entailed, which I guess in many ways, like culturally, yeah, for sure, right? I hesitate because obviously Trump has not improved the material conditions of this country in any way, shape, or form, or the world. I would go so far as to say, right? The idea that he was ever going to make America great again is laughable, because we know the influence that the Israeli lobby now has on our American politicians through AIPAC. So at this point, it's just so blatantly clear that to think otherwise is just willingly fucking, dick riding that MAGA movement. You know what I'm saying? But culturally, yeah, there's no doubt that it changed. And I saw the change most clearly in memetic culture, in meme culture, where even before Trump took office, we started to see the proliferation once again of the words gay and retard, right? People were openly stating that shit was gay and retarded all over again, right? And for them, it was like a sigh of relief that things were finally changing for the better, the quote unquote better, right? And that, this was being ushered in by Trump and it was like a following through on his promise to make America great again, right? But what I'm saying is that this was all manufactured. It was a manufactured reactionary movement that did nothing more than exactly what it is that Peter Thiel wanted, which was to get his candidate into office. Not just Trump now, mind you, but J.D. Vance as well. And that they engineered this whole fucking this social justice, it's a spectacle, and I hesitate to state it as such because what I'm doing is considered, in my opinion, genuine, like a form of genuine actual application of social justice theory. You know what I'm saying? By restoring the restorative justice element of trying to restore some of the ancestral philosophy in my own capacity, but also in terms of like demonstrating and highlighting the ways that, humanity is being subjugated by the masters of mankind and trying to provide the information that would create the space necessary for us to potentially change that. You know what I'm saying? The spectacle comes in when you start fucking shitting on Rachel Ray for her pozole, which, don't get me wrong, she deserved to be shit on. The fact that she would willingly do that, take a paycheck at the expense of of Mexican peoples and our culture is disgusting and nauseating, right? But the movement got so far co-opted and hijacked that was used as a demonstration for what social justice is. And because of that, people rightfully, like I'm telling you, I myself was like, I'm so fucking tired of this. I would gladly vote for Trump just as like a protest vote. You know what I'm saying? So I can just imagine like actual conservative people who see shit like that are like, dude, we don't fucking care about Taco Bell being appropriation. We're just trying to fucking live life and survive. Like, I'm trying to put food on my table, dog, and you're over here telling me that fucking non-black people wearing, dreads or braids is fucking racist. Like, I don't fucking care. And it's not because the plight of, Black Americans is inconsequential. It's because I'm got other shit that I'm worried about, bro. I can't pay my mortgage. I can't fucking put food on the table. I can't do shit like that. You know what I'm saying? And so what I'm telling you here then is that this shit was purposely designed and engineered by the masters of mankind to strip away any of the actual merit that actual leftist social justice is concerned with. We are concerned with universal health care, universal basic, I don't want to say basic income because that implies, capitalism still, but I'm not going to nitpick this, dog, because we could really get like fucking technical and into the woods with it. So I'll just say, for the sake of simplicity, yeah, fuck it. Universal basic income, universal health care, universal education, paid leave, paid maternity leave, fucking vacation, holiday, a living wage, all that kind of shit, which obviously the reason why I hesitate is because that all exists within a capitalist paradigm. But for the sake of the argument, you know what I mean? Like, I'll use that language. But things essentially that would make the lives of working class peoples easier, bro. That would help alleviate a lot of the suffering that the working class globally is experiencing, but definitely here in the United States of America. A lot of the anger and frustration that the right wing and the reactionary right wing in general is directed wrongly at minorities because we have been scapegoated, right? According to the dominant narrative. Minorities in general have been scapegoated as the reasons why people don't have health care, as the reasons why they can't afford their mortgage, why they can't afford groceries, why they can't afford electricity, their electric bill, their gas bill, etc., right? When in actuality, the answer is no, dude. It's been the fucking masters of mankind, the bourgeoisie, the entire time. They are the reason why we can't afford any of this. You know what I mean? And what actual leftist theory is trying to do, what actual social justice theory is trying to do, is demonstrate that so that we can showcase and arm, again, the proletariat with the intellectual tools necessary to recognize again and overthrow our oppressors. And they know that. You know what I mean? The CIA has think tanks dedicated to critical theory. They have think tanks dedicated to communism, to Marxism, to Maoism, to Leninism, right? Not because they're trying to, put these things into action themselves, these theories into action, but because they're trying to counteract the people who are thinking these theories because they're aware of how powerful these ideas are. This is where, you get the idealism of philosophy, where it says, ideas are what shape reality. And like literally, humans take the ideas that we uniquely have, and our ability to manipulate our opposable thumbs, and we create the world, essentially. You know what I mean? The materialists, which is where I would more ally myself with, they still believe that in a respect, but what they're going to say is that the material conditions, for the idealists, they believe, and this is Western idealism, they believe that like God is the progenitor and the originator of all ideas, and that he uniquely endowed humans with the ideas, and that these ideas are, what is responsible for the creation of the world, like the material world that we're living in, not like the actual physical planet. I'm talking about like society and all that kind of shit. You know what I mean? The infrastructure, the buildings, the cars, the iPhones, all that shit. That there were ideas that were gifted to humans by God, and then humans take these ideas and we concretize them into the material world, right? That's what the idealists believe. Again, I lay myself more with the materialist camp, which in the Western tradition of philosophy is the inversion of that. So they're going to say, no, it's not God. It's the material conditions that we're living in that are affecting our ideas. And we're trying to change these material conditions that we're living in. These ideas that, we get in response to them are survival strategies to try, in many ways, to try to alleviate these conditions that are, causing our life to be miserable, essentially, right? And they don't want that. The masters of mankind. And because of that, they have think tanks dedicated to, again, Marxism, Leninism, Maoism, critical theory in general, right? All that materialist dialectical philosophies, because they know of the power that these ideas have, right? So in this particular respect, then what I'm stating is that you have people like Peter Thiel, who purposely, not like him individually, like putting his fingerprints on it, but he funds these corporations that actively try to subvert leftist movements by doing shit like infiltrating academia and making social justice, reducing it from something that is genuinely impactful and meaningful in the lives of people to the stereotype that we're all familiar with, right? Where you have that, the not physically fit, let's put it that way, person, whether it's because they're obese or whether it's because they're malnutritioned, they're not physically intimidating in any particular way, shape, or form. They have the colored hair. There's a stereotype of the academic, bro. You know what I'm saying? That's yelling at people in their faces about how you're racist because you drink milk. Like, what, bro? Or how math is racist. They say, there was that one article that said math is racist to Mexican people. Bro, our ancestors built the pyramids, astrologically precise. Math is in our DNA. Like, what the fuck are you talking about? You know what I mean? And more importantly, how is this relevant to our inability to put food on our table, or, going bankrupt, or perhaps even dying because of our lack to medical care? Like, that's the real issue here. You know what I mean? So, in going all the way back to the video then, what I'm telling you is that, and I've talked about this since the formation of my Instagram account, but also this podcast, the quote unquote fake woke jokes, if you will, like I like to refer to them, who are pretending to be concerned about social justice when in reality they're just Muppets, dog. They are Muppets who are being manipulated by the masters of mankind to put forth this visage of what they want us to believe social justice is, so that it could be easily dismissed. And this whole last 10 years of American culture, if what Peter Thiel is telling us is to be believed, which I do think it is, it was all engineered. Whether it's the academics, whether it's the fucking people in Hollywood, like, it was all engineered by Peter Thiel and company, that in order to purposely drive the sentiment within Americans to vote reactionary governments into office, like Trump, right? Where Trump was seen as the savior from the woke mind virus who was going to allow you to say gay and retarded again. Yeah. In many ways, he absolutely is. But he's also the person that's going to implement the fucking transhumanist agenda. Like, he's also that too. You know what I mean? And if you were to tell these Republicans that you're going to have digital ID, you're going to have cryptocurrencies only, CBDCs, that you're going to have a surveillance state, a police state, they're not going to fall for it. You know what I mean? Because historically speaking, they were always very much against that. But if you tell them that your candidate is going to come in here and let you say gay and retarded again, well, of course, why wouldn't they want that? You know what I mean? And then what you get now is a candidate who is, pushed forth as the savior, if you will, in the cultural sense, who's also going to implement all the things that, historically speaking, the conservative movement allegedly cared about, which again is big government overreach, the police state, the surveillance state, fucking CDBCs, digital IDs, all that kind of shit, right? Which brings us finally, in a long and roundabout way, ultimately to the point that I wanted to talk about initially, which is one Joseph James Rogan, the host of the largest podcast on earth, who platformed and even once explicitly tweeted, this is an endorsement for Donald Trump, who platformed the very candidate that it is that I'm talking about, that's, ushering this through. And the reason why I want to talk about it, and the reason why I'm going to spend so much time talking about it, is because of how admittedly important a figure Joseph James Rogan was in my life. I know I've talked about it before briefly in the past, but it's really at the point now where I have avoided doing so in many ways for a variety of reasons. Mostly because I want to have my own thoughts on this, dog. And there's a lot of people now who are piling on the Joe Rogan hate train, which he deserves. Don't get me wrong, but it's not my intention. If you want to hear all the Joe Rogan hate videos, do what I did and go fucking YouTube them to find out why, right? But my intention is not to do that. My intention is more so to state my disillusionment and ultimate alienation with the Joe Rogan experience and the effect that it had, because of the effect that it had on my life, right? So the reason here being is because it's inescapable at this point. I haven't listened to, I'll like dip my toe in sporadically. I've not listened to one this year, probably even last year either. Okay. I can't even recall. Maybe the Graham Hancock one, not the debate, the one before the debate recently. So maybe like 2 years ago, that was the last episode I listened to. I don't know. The point here being is that I listened to it enough. So I started listening to the Joe Rogan Experience like in 2011, the fall of 2011, when I was an undergraduate in college, right? And I stopped listening during the pandemic. And I remember specifically it was because he had one celebrity, this fucking celebrity comedian on. It's like Hannibal Buress or something like that, one of those guys. And he started talking about how we needed to vote Hillary Clinton into office because only she could save America. And I was just like, I'm fucking done with this shit, bro. I don't need this fucking corporate shills talking to me about politics anymore. Just shut the fuck up and stick with the dick jokes. You know what I mean? And that's one thing that Joe Rogan's always said. I'm just a dick joke comedian. Then stick to the dick jokes, bro. Like, and if you're going to enter into the political spectrum, then at least fucking be responsible for the massive influence and impact that you have on the political spectrum and quit trying to duck the responsibility by saying, I'm just a dirty dick joke comment. You're not anymore. You forfeited that by, having these prominent or governmental figures on your podcast type shit. You know what I'm saying? But anyways, the whole reason I got into this, and I'll talk about that more briefly in a little bit. But I just wanted to, I just introduced it now to demonstrate one of the reasons why I hadn't really talked about it is because I did for a long time, still do, I guess, take a lot of what Joe Rogan said into heart. And, one of the things that he's always said is that people that critique successful people are just jealous and bitter. And I was like, I don't want to be that. So that's part of the reason why I had avoided talking. It's one of the reasons why. Because it's like, is that what I'm doing? Because I don't want to just jump on this bitch and give like another angry fucking hate video on why Joe Rogan sucks. Like, I don't think Joe Rogan's comedy's funny. He's got some funny bits from back in the day, but as a whole, I've never really seen one of his specials and be like, oh my God, this is one of the greatest specials of all time. Not like on a George Carlin type shit, not on some Dave Chappelle type shit, not even on some Bill Burr type shit. You know what I mean? I think they're far funnier than Joe Rogan. But anyways, the whole point here, in even bringing that up, is just to demonstrate, like, I just wanted to be very clear about, why it is that I have my disdain for Joe Rogan. Some people diss him because of his comedy. Some people diss him because of his podcast. I diss him more because me personally, I feel as though he has betrayed everything that it is that built his platform on. Where people like myself, these disenfranchised young men who were void of a masculine in many ways, traditionally, I don't want to say traditionally, but like masculine in the Western conception. This is very important because it's going to be part of what I talk about Rogan in forthcoming episodes, but masculine in a Western sense, right? Figure in our lives. And that's it sounds weird to say that because obviously I had a very, very, very strong, prominent masculine figure in my life. But my grandfather was more ancestral, like far more ancestral, even though he had like a lot of the, it's not like it's like a sharp delineation. There is overlap, right? So a lot of what the ancestral masculinity implied also is, present in the Western masculinity, which is it's an issue in and of itself when you have people who are saying this is problematic, like working out is problematic because it upholds these right wing values, and it's like, well, in the ancestral tradition, working out is hugely important, so what the fuck are we talking about? You know what I mean? So to say that is you're kind of dismissing the ancestral voice. But anyways, I digress. My grandfather was far more of an ancestral masculine figure. And growing up without a father in America, I clearly was impacted in a way that I fell victim to it, dog. I was suckered. Like, it's hard for me to admit. I'm dancing around the subject. I feel like I was suckered by Joe Rogan. But I guess not really entirely because, to be fair, people have been critiquing him of being a grifter even back in 2011, 2012. But I didn't think so. I thought he was very genuine and I thought he was very sincere. And his genuineness and his sincerity and, his seemingly good advice in navigating through life really came through clutch for me at a time in life when I needed it. Because, again, even though I had the masculine, influence in my life, it wasn't necessarily one that was conducive to navigating life in the 21st century of America. You know what I mean? And that's not a knock on my grandfather, so much as it is just a complete, he was born in the 1930s in Mexico. Like, you can't expect somebody who came, he was 18 in 1950. You know what I mean? Like, this is a complete different world back then. You know what I'm saying? So to expect someone like that to understand what it was like growing up now it's unfair to my grandfather, right? And in many ways, Joe Rogan himself is out of touch too. He's a boomer in and of himself. However, he was a masculine figure that grew up roughly around the same time that I did. And because of that, I did look up to him. You know what I mean? As I mentioned before, I would have never started jiu-jitsu. I started jiu-jitsu in late 2012, right? So like almost 2013. And it was all because of the Joe Rogan experience. I hear him talking about how, prominent jiu-jitsu was in his life and how much of a centering force it was in his life inspired me to go out and do the same. And now, obviously, here I am 13 years later doing the same myself. And there's still like so much other shit, like in terms of like values even, these again, now I'm starting to undo the values of themselves from Joe Rogan, and I'm starting to understand them for what they are, and that is like universal human values, and that is like working out, you know what I'm saying? But it's a huge impetus in my life to want to do the same. And, questioning the government, like the whole show, Joe Rogan questions everything. Like, fuck yeah, dog. This is young me, just got my philosophy degree, watching this figure who was like a celebrity, who is actually questioning things that, many people in that sphere didn't prior to him. And that's what made his podcast so appealing in the first place, was that he would have these guests on and he would hold them accountable for the shit that they would say. You know what I mean? And to see that slowly slip away throughout the 8 years that it was that I had listened to his podcast was kind of disheartening. It really was, right? And it's just becoming so much more obvious now. Again, like I said, I haven't listened to the podcast in, earnest since 2020. And realistically, I haven't even listened to an episode since maybe 2022, 2023, right? So I'm kind of like speaking from a position of inexperience at this point, but knowing, just because of how vested I was in the podcast in its infancy to what it became, I'm pretty sure I'm not far off, Doc, to what it is that Joe Rogan has become, which is essentially a shill for the masters of mankind. One of the things that really drew me to Joe Rogan, one of the many things initially, was he would always say, like, you just got to work hard enough to get fuck you money, right? And it just seems now that, he's got that. He's had that. He would openly speak about that. He said, like, since the Fear Factor days, I've had the fuck you money. And he's only gotten fucking wealthier since then. And it's just so strange that it seems as though he's used that money to tell the only people that he's, he stuck that giant middle finger up to us, dog, right? He said fuck you to the people who got him to where he is in the first place, his fucking fans, right from the get-go. And I'm not saying that he doesn't still have fans from the OG days of, podcasting in his basement with Brian Callen or Brian Redband, you know what I mean? But that's when I started listening. The very first episode I listened to was like Mayhem Miller, right? Or maybe Joey Diaz. Like, I'm talking about like episode 150. That's when I jumped in that bitch. You know what I mean? I'm sure he still has some fans from back in those days too, right? But what I'm saying is that it's just not the same, dog. And the reason why it's so important to say is because now more than ever, given the role that he occupies, it's just so important that we hold these people accountable, because if he was something of a masculine figure to myself, you can just imagine how much more millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions, maybe even people out there not only feel the same, but are now emulating their entire worldview based off of this character, which is fucking dangerous, bro, because again, he's used his fuck you money to turn around and say fuck you to us, the working class people, by becoming essentially a shill for the technocracy. The one video that really tripped me out recently was he himself was talking about AI, or, Jesus coming back as AI. I mean, that's fucking transhumanist agenda 101, bro. The idea that this, this salvation figure is going to come back through artificial intelligence. And, I hate to give these people credit, not because they don't deserve it, but because I don't like buying into the Christian moralizing. But I mean, that's what they've been talking about this whole time, that the AI is going to be the Antichrist, that Peter Thiel himself is the Antichrist. And when you have these very powerful figures like Joe Rogan who are advocating for this, it's super deceitful for sure. And it makes it so much more difficult to get people on board with understanding the dangers of where it is that this country and this world is heading, dog. And that is, of course, techno-feudal fascism, bro. And it's horrifying in many ways. And of course, Rogan's not going unchallenged in this. Like, you do have people who are, challenging him to an extent. I haven't seen a Bill Burr episode, and from what I heard, he hasn't been on the podcast since like 2023 when he challenged him. My camera's run out of a battery, so unfortunately, this is going to be audio only for the remaining portion of the podcast. I'll keep it short, right? Because I've already gotten like 2.5 hours out this bitch, and I don't want to take up too much of your precious energy and time, right? But one of the figures, I'll leave it at this. I guess we can cut it off with this, and I'll, move on to the next part for the next episode, is Theo Von. Theo Von gets a lot of, a credit, if you will, for challenging Joe Rogan. And I'm not saying that he doesn't deserve it, because he definitely has from what I've seen. Again, just the clips, because I don't really watch anything of the actual podcast itself, right? But this is hood philosophy, bro. Hood philosophy, if I want to use the academic language to explain it to you, is predicated off the idea of organic intellectuals. Someone that doesn't operate within the system that is fucking being facilitated by the very people that it is we're trying to, replace, essentially, right? And Theo Von, I don't know him personally, so I guess I'll give him the benefit of the doubt, but when I hear him, I don't really follow him in any way either. Just clips that I'm exposed to on social media. But when I see him, I think of that Albert Pike quote where he's talking about how if people want a hero, we will provide them with one. We being the masters of mankind. And that's the vibes that I get from Theo Von. And the reason being is because he operates within, he's from that system himself. Like, he has this grand story about, his origin, if you will. But the part that he always leaves out is that he's an aristocrat. He comes from a family of aristocrats. You know what I mean? These are the very fucking people that we're talking about, bro. So how is an aristocrat going to come in here and save the working class foos? Like, no, man, only organic intellectuals can do the work necessary to liberate ourselves. You know what I'm saying? So that's why whenever I hear Theo Von speaking on anything, I take it with a grain of salt. It's not something I really consider too deeply, right? If I was to listen to anyone within the Rogan sphere, it would probably be, that's still on the podcast, would be Tim Dillon. In fact, I'm lying from earlier. The last episode that I listened to was the Tim Dillon episode, right? I fuck with Tim Dillon. I don't watch his own, like I don't watch his podcast personally. Just whatever I see from him on Joe Rogan and clips that I see. But I do, when the shit that I do hear him say, I fuck with him. You know what I mean? And it seems like he, more than anyone, is the one that's definitely holding Joe Rogan accountable, far more than Theo Von, right? Nevertheless, the whole reason why I'm mentioning it now, right, is like, Tim Dillon's got that one episode. It's the last one that I listened to. I don't know the number of it. But like, he even called, in many ways subliminally, sneak dissing, straight to his face, Rogan for having lunch with Peter Thiel. And then Rogan tries to get him on like this gotcha moment where he's like, but you won't have lunch with Peter Thiel because, all the reasons Tim Dillon gives, which was like, once I'm, in that circle with them, I don't feel comfortable roasting them, which obviously that's what they want. That's why they fucking brought Rogan in, because they understand how powerful of a figure he is. And now you have this little lapdog Rogan who, like I said before, went from holding people accountable on his podcast to not even pushing back on the director of the FBI, Kash Patel, when they're talking about the fucking Epstein list with Trump being on it. Like, on his podcast as it's unfolding, when Elon Musk drops the fucking bombshell that's the reason why Trump hadn't released him yet, because he was on the files, right? 2012, 13, 14, 15, Rogan wouldn't have done that. He would have grilled and he would have continued to push, right? But now neutered Rogan, because of the circles that he surrounded himself with, namely Peter Thiel, doesn't, because he's afraid, essentially, it seems like, or more sinisterly, because he's bought into the technocratic agenda. And, as evidenced by him coming out on that video and stating, yeah, Jesus could definitely come back as the AI. Like, that's the transhumanist technocratic agenda in a nutshell. That's Peter Thiel's fucking baby right there. You know what I mean? So to hear this Rogan character talking about it is very discouraging, very disheartening, and very concerning for people like myself, and probably should be for a lot of people, bro. Right? So it's nice to hear Tim Dillon like pushing back against this, even if he's doing so subliminally, because at the very least he's doing so on a podcast with such a massive reach and influence that the ideas, again, going back to the explanation that I gave to you earlier about the distinction between idealism and materialism, at the very least, him doing so subconsciously is fomenting the ideas in the minds of people that this is not somebody to be trusted. These are not people that, again, going way back to the days of the Rogan podcast, bro, I knew that shit was cooked. There was like 2 instances when I knew that it was cooked. The first is the very, very first time he had the quote unquote former CIA agent Mike Baker on the podcast. One of the dumbest fucking podcasts I've ever heard in my life. All that dude talked about was life in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, and his children's weird names, right? And this is the only one I listened to with him on it. But it always struck me as odd because, bro, there's no such thing as a former CIA agent. What are we doing here, first and foremost, okay? Second of all, like, he came out of left field. This was not at the time. This wasn't a guest that was very common on the Joe Rogan podcast. This was, we're talking about the early days of the podcast where you had fighters, fellow comedians, an occasional scientist like Neil deGrasse Tyson, but an actual FBI, CIA agent, bro, retired or not, completely out of left field. And that's where the rumor started of Joe Rogan being a shill, controlled opposition, really started to kick into high gear. And the second instance was before he revealed that his podcast was no longer live. I remember watching a Fight Companion, and it was with Eddie Bravo when he was still on the Fight Companions. And he was about to go into the conspiracy theory rabbit hole. And then it just cut off. Some of the Fight Companions have been incredible because of, most of the Fight Companions, I would say, have been incredible because of Eddie Bravo and his, truth bombs that he'd go on there and drop. And they would go for extended periods of time. And then this one time, like literally Eddie Bravo was just mid-conversation and then boom, it cut out. And when they came back, they were talking about something completely different, which was weird because at this point, we still didn't know that the Rogan podcast was no longer filmed live. Prior to this, everyone was under the assumption that it was being filmed live. And it wasn't until a couple of weeks later that Rogan came out and said, yeah, this podcast is no longer a live podcast for a variety of reasons. And I was like, whoa, that's fucking weird, bro. Like, you just cut off Eddie Bravo midway through one of his epic conspiracy, quote unquote, conspiracy theory rants, and you just cut back in like nothing to a complete different part of the podcast. Like, what the fuck is that all about? You know what I'm saying? And of course, this was like 9 years ago. So it was revealed that what that was all about is like, yeah, he's in bed with very powerful people who are trying to push an agenda. And he's no longer at that point already in a position where he's willingly going to jeopardize the golden egg that he's been given, essentially, right? By challenging it in any way, shape, or form, which ultimately, and this is, like I mentioned, eventually I'm going to get to the point of Rogan and masculinity, alleged masculinity from the Western world. And this is where I'll end it for today, and we'll pick up with that for the next episode. He's just such a weak, pathetic bitch in my eyes now, bro. Like, seriously. Like, I don't care how strong he is. I don't care how fit he is. I don't care his black belt in jiu-jitsu, his history in taekwondo. I don't care about any of that. It means nothing. Because at the end of the day, he is prostrating himself for the masters of mankind. He's a power bottom for Peter Thiel, dog. That's it. Nothing more, nothing less. He has become an instrument for the bourgeoisie to exercise their control and authority over the working class people. And he serves no opposition to that at all whatsoever. In fact, he openly, whether willingly or otherwise, promotes it. And because of that, he is the least bit masculine person in my eyes. He is, quite frankly, to use his own language, a weak bitch. Ah, boy. So yeah, I guess that would be about as good a time as any to go ahead and wrap this bitch up. I hope you've enjoyed it. I know I have. It's been about like 5-6 days since it's taken me to get this bitch out. 3 different recording days for sure. A couple days break in between. But I'm looking forward to getting these bitches out more consistently moving forward. Until then, on Katimo Mati. Peace.